Hi there BookTube, it's Eleanor here, and today I'm doing my August TBR slash my N.E.W.T. readathon TBR because I've decided that I'm going to take all the N.E.W.Ts, or at least have a TBR for all the N.E.W.Ts. This wonderful readathon, if you haven't heard about the Hogwarts readathons that have been going on, the first ones were the Owls, and Book Roast's channel had the Owl readathons, and now the N.E.W.Ts. And if you are taking part in the N.E.W.Ts, you really should have done your Owls so that you can find out which N.E.W.Ts you're going for, but I'm kind of going with what she said was okay, and I'm just going to work towards my N.E.W.Ts. I did do the Owls, but I can't really remember what I managed to do, and I wanted to make this a whole thing for me. The N.E.W.Ts take place the 1st to the 31st of August, so it's a whole month readathon, so there's plenty of opportunity to read plenty of books. Now, there's no way I'm going to read all of the books on this because there are 36 books in total if you wanted to complete everything on here. So the basic idea, I can show you my list but you probably can't see it there, is that you've got each of the subjects, and for each subject there is 3 things. So there is an acceptable, an exceeded expectations, and an outstanding. Now, in order to get outstanding, you have to have read the acceptable and the exceeded expectations. So that means for every subject there is 3 books you need to read to be able to have ticked off that N.E.W.Ts. So I hope that sort of makes sense. Now, I believe the Book Roast channel said that in order, it says here, yeah, in order to pass a minimum of 2 subjects of their choice and achieve an outstanding in at least 1. So that means that in order to do that, you will have needed to have read 4 books. You will have needed to have read the acceptable, exceeded expectation, and outstanding in 1 subject, and then you could have just read the acceptable in another and got 2 subjects. However, I'm going to try and do as many as I can, so we shall see. But yeah, I will link up above the Book Roast's announcement video because she very succinctly and much better than me talks about this. But here is my TBR for it. So I'm going to start with ancient runes. So to get acceptable for ancient runes, the first thing you need to do is read a book set in the past. And I'm going to read A Shadow Bright and Burning by Jessica Clues. This is set in Victorian England, which sounds brilliant. It's about a girl who has magic and she is forced to reveal that power when she is protecting someone, and rather than being executed, she is sent to become one of Her Majesty's royal sorcerers. So she's a trainee. This sounds brilliant. I'm looking forward to it, and yeah, that is going to be my book set in the past because Victorian England is definitely the past. And in order to exceed expectations of this, you have to have read one of the most ancient books on your shelf. So a book that you've had for ages, and one that really springs to mind for me, which I think I've had well, at least as long as my channel's been going, and that is Tiger Lily by Jodie Lynn Anderson. This is, I believe, the story of Tiger Lily in Peter Pan and how she falls in love with Peter, and I've heard really good things. I don't know why I've never read it, so this is my pick for that one. Next is, in order to get outstanding, is to read a book that has been translated, and I'm picking The History of Bees by Marja Lund. This is translated, I believe, from its original Norwegian. Yeah, her original Norwegian, and I think this sounds like a brilliant story. It's set over 3 time periods: 1852, where we're looking at a seed merchant who's looking to build a new type of beehive, United States in 2007, where we're looking at a beekeeper, and then China in 2098, so a bit in the future, where we're looking at a man that hand paints pollen onto fruit trees because the bees have disappeared. This sounds intriguing, and this is going to be my translated. So if I manage to read all of these 3, I will have got my ancient runes. Next up, I've managed to shoehorn a bit of a trilogy into arithmetic. The prompts for this are a book of at least 300 pages, a book that ends on an even numbered page, and then a book that is not the first in a series. So, a book with over 300 pages, Am I Normal Yet by Holly Bourne. A book that ends on a even number, How Hard Can Love Be by Holly Bourne. And a book that is not the first in a series is What's a Girl Got to Do by Holly Bourne. So these are 3 books in Holly Bourne's Spinster Club series. I've heard they're really good YA feminist themed novels around a group of friends. I'm really excited about these, and if I get all 3, I will have got my arithmetic. For astronomy, the 3 prompts are a book with stars on the cover, a book with sky in the title, and a story set on a different planet or word. So my book with stars on the cover is a jigsaw of fire and stars, and you can see the stars in the sky on this, and it's also got the literal word stars, so I thought that was quite good. This is the story of a girl who washes up ashore. She's a refugee, and she 14 years later, so she's washed up as a refugee when she's a baby. 14 years later, she's part of a circus. Yeah, this sounds really magical, and it says the Daily Mail has said a blend of magical realism and brutality that is powerful, and an original novel, so that sounds really intriguing to me. The book, which has a sky in the title, is A Shiver of Snow and Sky by Lisa Luedecker. This is a proof copy that I obviously need to read, and this is about a place where when lights appear on a clear sky, their colour have meaning. So green means all is well and the goddess is happy, blue means a snowstorm is on the way, and red is the rarest of all and it's a warning. And it says 17 years ago the sky turned red just as Ossa was born, unleashing a plague that claimed the lives of hundreds of villagers, including her own mother. This time, when the night sky once again bleeds crimson, she must discover what it means before lives are lost again. So that sounds good. And then the final one, which is set on a different world or planet, I've picked 172 Hours on the Moon by Johan Harstad, a book I've had for quite a long time, and I quite fancied it at the moment, and it's set on the moon. So this is about a group of children or young adults that are competing in order to get a space on a space shuttle that NASA is sending up to the moon. So they're competing to try and win a place on this shuttle. It sounds intriguing, it sounds fun and fast-paced, so I've picked that one. The next category is Care of Magical Creatures, and the prompts for this are animal on the cover, book under 160 pages, and one that includes dragons. So the one I picked with animals on the cover has birds, and that is The Wild Folk by Sylvia V. Lindstedt. So this is the first book in a duology. It tells the story of 2 young hares and their human companions, and I think they are trying to protect their world from something called star gold. Star gold is like a magical thing which everyone is sort of coveting. I don't know if it's like a gold or it's like their currency, but they are running out, I think, and they are trying to protect themselves from being corrupt. I'm not 100% sure, but I think it sounds brilliant. 2 hares as a main character, what could be better? The book that is under 150 pages, I've picked Communicating Better with People on the Autism Spectrum, 35 Things You Need to Know by Paddy Jo Moran. This is a book that I'm hoping to read to give me a bit better insight into working with children with autism, and Paddy Jo Moran is autistic himself, so this is a really interesting read. It's split up into sort of parts, like part 13 here is called Sarcasm, and I believe it just gives you a little bit of an insight into what you can do to help your interactions with them on a daily basis. And then the last one is a book including dragons in any way, and I've picked up The Last Namsara by Kristin Ciccarelli. This is a YA fantasy story about a dragon wrangler or dragon slayer, and so it's about a young girl who is a dragon slayer, and I'm sure are going to find out some more interesting things about the law and the dragons in this society. Next up is Charms, and for Charms you have to read a book with magic in it, a book with a cover that charmed you, and a book that you think will leave a mark. So the first one that has magic in it, I've picked my next book for Sarah J Maas, and that is Queen of Shadows by Sarah J Maas, so I will be reading this one. And then for the cover that I love, that is The Lost Flowers of Alice Hart by Horry Ringland. I think this is beautiful and I can't wait to read this. It sounds really interesting. It says, tragedy changes her life irreparably. 90-year-old Alice Hart goes to live with her grandmother on a native flower farm for refugees who, like Alice, are lost or broken. And every flower has its meaning. She settles into this life using the language of flowers to say things that are too hard to speak. And then she sort of starts to unravel things in her life as she gets older. I think this sounds brilliant. And then the final one that I think is going to leave a mark is A False Report, A True Story by T. Christian Miller and Ken Armstrong. This is non-fiction. It's set in America. It is about a woman that reports a rape and is made to feel by the police and others that she is lying, and it I think basically turns out that she wasn't when something else happens, and there becomes a serial of rapes occurring. I'm intrigued by this one and I've heard really interesting things, so I think this will leave a mark with me because obviously the subject matter, how could it not? And also yeah, I just the legal system and rape just, yeah, is something that baffles me. Yeah, anyway, less said, and I'll read this and then I'll come back and talk about it a bit more. But yes, that one for leaving a mark. Okay, so for Defence Against the Dark Arts, I've got to read a last book in a series, a foiled book, and a book with dark in the title or series name. So this, I believe, is the current last book in this series. I haven't seen any more come out. Correct me if I am wrong. And a Happy New Year, a Spinster Club special by Holly Bourne. I'm not going to tell you about this one because I don't know, because I haven't read the series yet. The book that is a foiled book is 101 Pieces of Me by Veronica Bennett. This is about a young girl who lives a very unassuming life and then gets thrust into stardom in Hollywood, and it's about how her life changes. And then finally the book with dark in the title, I'll Be Gone in the Dark by Michelle McNamara. This has been all over BookTube and all over general life and newspaper articles and reviews. It's Michelle McNamara's book about the Golden State Killer and her research into that, and it's quite poignant recently because they have caught the Golden State Killer, so I'm looking forward to reading a bit more about this. I don't know anything about it at all, so I'm intrigued to see how she went about investigating this as sort of an amateur and enthusiast, and what her findings were. Next up is Divination, and that is a book set in the future, a book under 200 pages, and a mythological book. The book set in the future, I am picking Eve of Man, by Giovanna and Tom Fletcher. This is a story where babies, I think it's 50 years in the future, babies have stopped being, female babies have stopped being born, all babies are male, and then Eve is born, and she is taken into sort of facility and kept and, you know, nurtured with kid gloves because she is the last hope of the universe or the world. And then we're following a boy called Bram, I think, who works within this facility and plays on the role of her holographic friend, so he controls like he's basically her best friend, but not in the physical sense. She's never actually met him. He's like working somewhere else and being holographed in. I'm sure there's going to be a romance. This is written from dual perspective, so I'm looking forward to this one. The book under 200 pages, I've picked Penelope Fitzgerald's The Bookshop. This is set in East Anglian town of Harborough, Florence Green, and it's about her setting up a bookshop against ruthless local opposition, so I'm looking forward to reading this one. And then the book with mythological is Circe by Madeline Miller. I loved The Song of Achilles. I've heard nothing but good things about this one, so I shall be reading this, and I can't wait to find out more about Circe. For Herbology, we've got a book with green on the cover, a book with illustrations, and a book with either light, air, sun or water in the title. So the book with green on the cover, I've picked Far From the Tree by Robin Benway. This is a YA contemporary story about a young girl who's 16 and gets pregnant and puts her baby up for adoption. During this, she discovers that she has two siblings that she never knew existed, and I'm supposing we're following the story from there, and I think it's meant to be very, very good. The book with illustrations, I've picked a graphic novel, and that is Swing It Sunny by Jennifer L. Holm and Matthew Holm. This is the second in this series, with the first being Sunny Side Up. I really enjoyed Sunny Side Up, so I'm looking forward to getting into this one and following this girl in her, it's just her life and how her family, there was issues in her family, and I just thought it was a really fun read. And finally, the book that has light, air, sun or water in the title, I've picked The Air He Breathes, which is by Brittany C. Cherry. I think this is a new adult or an adult story, romance. It says, I was warned about Tristan Cole. Stay away from him, people said. He's cruel, he's cold, he's damaged. It's easy to judge a man because of his past, to look at Tristan and see a monster, but I couldn't do that. I had to accept the wreckage that lived inside of him because it also lived inside of me. We were both empty, we were both looking for something else, something more. We both wanted to put together the shattered pieces of our yesterdays, then perhaps we could finally remember how to breathe. So we'll see about that one. We're getting there, folks, don't worry. Next is History of Magic, and that's a book you would fit right into the Hogwarts library. A book published at least 5 years ago, and a book that's at least 400 pages. I thought this one looked like it'd fit in. I know it's the proof copy, but it looks really magical, and that is Legendary by Stephanie Garber. This is the second book, the follow-on to Caraval, which I really enjoyed, so I can't tell you too much about it, but I think this would fit into the Hogwarts library. The next book is a book at least 5 years old, and that is What Sunny Saw in the Flames by Nnedi Okorafor. This is, in America this was called A Catawitch, but over here in England it's called What Sunny Saw in the Flames. This is a sort of, well, I think it is a fantasy type book. It's following 12-year-old Sunny. She's an albino, and she realises she has some sort of magical power, and she's got magical abilities, and I think she has to go and learn all about it. I don't know if she goes to a magical school, but I've heard good things, and so I want to read this. And the book that has at least 400 pages I've picked is State of Sorrow by Melinda Salisbury. I'm looking forward to trying this one out. Just 3 more N.E.W.T.S to be looking at. The first one is Muggle Studies. Read a book by one of your favourite authors, a biography and a retelling. So one of my favourite authors, I haven't really got many favourite authors, but someone who I read recently, which I think has potential to be one, is Taylor Jenkins Reid, and I want to read The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. So I've picked this one up. Evelyn Hugo is a Hollywood icon. She enlists someone that's very, you know, not very well known in the magazine industry to write her biography, and I'm sure we're going to find out all about Evelyn's life. Make sure you check out my 6,000 subscriber video and giveaway. I'll link it up here because I'm actually giving away a copy of this along with another book, so if you want to be in for a chance of that, go over there and make sure that you follow the competition rules. Let's move on to the next one because I can see my battery going. The next one is the biography, and I've picked up Mad Girl by Bryony Gordon. This is Bryony Gordon's talking very candidly about her life with OCD. And then the book that is a retelling, I've picked Heartless by Marissa Meyer, which is looking at the Queen of Hearts and her life before Alice. For potions, I've got Name of a Colour in the title. I've picked up Red Clocks, which is by Lenny Zumas. This is a story set where there's been a bill changed where abortions are illegal in America, and it's a look into a certain number of women that live in a small community and how they relate to that. The next is a book with a male lead character. I've picked Noah Could Never by Simon James Green. This is the second in a series. The first one, Noah Can't Even, about a young gay man. And then the book over 350 pages long, I've picked In Search of Us by Ava Delaria. This looks great, and it's the story of a photo which a teenage mother finds and realises that perhaps her father she thought was her father that had died wasn't. So we'll go on that journey with her. And then finally, Transfiguration, a book with grey on the cover. I've picked Control, Starting a Geology by Lydia Kang. This is a sort of science fiction story, I believe, set in a world with holographs and neuro drugs. sounds interesting. A book from an author you haven't read anything before. The Children, I'm going fast because of my battery. The Children of Jocasta by Natalie Haynes. This is again a story set in Thebes, and it's about 15-year-old Jocasta and her life. I've heard it's similar, Song of Achilles feel. And then finally a book set in a kingdom that has royals, Captive Prince by C.S. Pacat. I've heard various things about this. I want to try it. I don't know much about it. I've heard it's quite graphic. We'll see. That is all my TBR. I'm going to run out of battery. I'm really excited about all of these and seeing how many I can get through. Are you doing this? Let me know. Have you read any of these? Where shall I start? What shall I take first for my notes? I'll speak to you soon. Bye for now, BookTube.